Hello everybody, it's another great day to learn some Photoshop. Welcome, we're going to get back into some more Photoshop basics here and we'll look at some fun things with layers and learn about a few more things that you can do and where things are. So let's just cover a few of the basics in Photoshop just so you know where everything is. There's a few main areas and I'm actually going to reset my workspace so that you guys basically, if you start Photoshop for the first time, you should see something fairly similar here. Let me get this all fitting on screen. So when you open up Photoshop for the very first time, you should see something very similar to this. So your first question might have been, what is a workspace? So if you go to Window and Workspace, you will see that there are some different options available. Now let's put on a different one and see what happens. So let's go to painting. Now you would think that for a painting kind of workspace that we probably would see more painting tools. So we see some brushes, we see some colors, things that you might use a lot when you do painting. What other workspaces are there? You know, you can actually do video and animation or different kinds of motion in Photoshop. So there's a motion workspace. If you go to that, you're given a video timeline of some things that you can do there. And so Photoshop is put together just some different ways of setting up your panels. So your panels are all these different things that have tabs and names. These different things are called panels. And the essentials is kind of what everybody starts out with. And if you ever, one thing that's nice is you can arrange these however you want. So you can, if you want, and you can pull these off. So if you want your layers to be up close to where you're working, you can do that. You can put it right back. You kind of see the blue line pop up when you are allowed to move things and do different things. Also, you'll see that right now, these panels are kind of spread out. And you also have these double arrows. If you click those, you'll see that it shrinks it down. So right now I have 3 different columns here. Now one panel you might want to play around with is this Learn panel. If you click into these, it'll actually take you through a few tutorials. Usually a couple of these panels I like to have a little more hidden. So I'll collapse these and that makes my stage space here, or my artboard space, better to work with. Now you'll notice that you have an icon and some text explaining what each panel is, but if you kind of learn what each icon means, you can actually shrink this down even more and see just the icons. But if you like to have that reminder of what it is, you can pull that out. And perhaps maybe I don't want this 3rd column. Maybe that takes up too much space. So I can grab this history and I can just stick it right down here. And you can arrange things however you want. You can put them all on the other side. And if you get something that you like, you can actually go and save your own workspace. And so you can go to New Workspace right here. Oops, I don't want to delete it, sorry. Workspace, New Workspace. And you can give that a name and decide if you want your menus, the toolbar, all that stuff remembered as well. And then what happens is when you save it, you'll then see, you don't see any here, but there'll be another couple options here. For whatever you named it, you'll see that. So you might call it Josh's Workspace or whatever your name is. And then you can click on that and go to that anytime you want. Now, like I said, you notice that I did drag some things around, and you can, sometimes I get kind of messy and drag things in different places. Well, what you can do is you can always, I'm still on my Essentials workspace, but I need to reset it to kind of go back to the start. So let me kind of go back to what I like. I usually don't necessarily need that history there. And I like to see the layers. And one thing too is you might just, there's so many of these, you might lose track of something you're looking for. If you're ever looking for a particular panel, you can go to Window and you can find it. All right, so you'll notice I've got a file open. Let's see, what else do we also, I didn't mention the control panel as well. Or not the control panel, but the toolbar. So this is the toolbar, and it actually has a double arrow as well, which kind of just changes, you know, if you want it wide like this or you want it stretched out like this, it's up to you. And so these are all of your common tools that you have. And when you start off in Photoshop as well, especially the newer version of Photoshop, the older version may not see this or that Learn panel, but these will tell you what these different tools are. Also, you'll notice if you click and look under, it's almost like under, right? So under the tool, a lot of these that have this little arrow in the corner, that means there's more tools available in here. You can close this panel and you might lose track of it. If you ever lose it, same thing, you can go to Window and go to Tools. Now, one thing you'll notice about the tools is that depending on which tool you have selected, along the top here is something called the control bar. And this has options for that particular tool. So you'll notice if I change the tool, the options are a little bit different depending on what I have selected. Now, if this bar is never not there, that's called options. And you can turn that off and on just by clicking it there. So I also have a default feature. I have multiple files open that we'll look at today. There's different ways you can have these arranged. So you look at Arrange menu, and you can actually kind of put them 2 up or 3 up, horizontal or vertical. I have 3 files, so let's try 3 up vertical. You can see you can actually see all these images at the same time if you want. They're a lot more narrow though, so you may not like that. Or if you do horizontal, you'll see it spread out this way. And you can, oops, my mouse is flying away on me. But let me go back to what I kind of like is the tile all vertical, I think. Or no, let's see, which one was it on to start with? Consolidate to tabs. So that kind of brings us back to that, where we just have tabs across the top. All right, so let's get into some tools that will be fun and talk about layers a little bit. Layers is a panel here that you'll probably spend a lot of time on. So what are layers, you might wonder? So back when we did graphic design in the good old days, we actually would draw things. Actually, if you even think about cartoon animation, what they would do is they would draw on these clear sheets of paper called acetate. You can see completely through it. And what they would do is they could draw something on one layer, and then they could get another piece of this clear paper and draw on that and put it on top. So you could actually stack a bunch of different drawings on top of each other, but because you could see through it, you'd be able to see all the different drawings that you did on the different pieces. So this kind of works in the same way. So whenever you just open an image, and I kind of skip that step, but you pretty much just go to File, Open, and then you can find a file that you're going to open, and it'll pull it up like this. You could also drag a photo. If you have a Mac, you might have the File Finder, or on a PC, you have the File Explorer. You can just drag your files over, and it'll open it up right in Photoshop. So also, sometimes in a Mac anyway, you can drag an image straight to the logo for the file, and it'll open it there. But when you open an image, it'll come in, and it's called background. That means it's just kind of the backmost back layer, and they'd like to lock it here by default. You may not want that. Sometimes it helps to lock something or not, but if you want to move it around or do something else with it, maybe you don't want it locked. So in that case, you can click that to unlock it, and it actually changes the name to layer 0. Now you can change these names to whatever you want. So I'm going to call this Josh. And just keep in mind, anytime you have a layer selected, you can lock it or unlock it with that little lock there. When you lock it, that means that you can't paint on it or draw on it or mess it up. So sometimes if you get a layer and you're done with it, what you can do is lock it, and then you won't mess it up again. But if you ever try to paint or do something on it and it's not working, it might be because it's locked. So you have to check that. So this little button down here, the square with the plus, as you see as it rolls, that tooltip comes up and tells you what it's going to do before I do it. You click on this and it creates a new layer. Now again, we can name this layer anything we want. Now notice that it looks clear. this little thumbnail here shows us that there's what is in this layer. So in this case, I have this photo. And notice I can use this eyeball to turn things off and on for what I'm seeing. You can turn that layer off and on. You also notice that when I'm just looking at layer 1, it's empty. So the way that they show, it's a little bit hard to show nothing, right? So the way that Photoshop shows that there's nothing there is by this checkerboard pattern. And so that means that there's nothing there. So before I bring my picture of myself here in here, this silly photo I have, let's just practice painting on this layer. And I might even double click that and call that paint for a paint layer. So one of the first tools that we can play around with is just the brush. Now, if you want, you can just hit the B key on your keyboard to get the brush, or you can click it right here. Now, a couple things. We looked at this possibly before when we did some pixel art, but you can choose your foreground color, and this will be the color that your brush is going to be. So if you just click on this top chip here, that's your foreground color, and we can choose any color we like. And I think I'm going to go for kind of a brownish color. Hit OK. And then for your brush, now depending, you might get a different size brush depending on how it might be thicker, it might be smaller, but you can essentially just draw. But the way to change that is there's a drop down. Remember that control bar up here? So you can click on this, and there's something called the size. And you can see this little thumbnail right here. That's showing you a little bit of how big your brush is. Now it gets to a point where it gets so big that you can't even see it. But the size, when you paint it, you'll see that it gets gotten thicker. So let me make the size even bigger. Oh, look, it's a little bit bigger. And then I can go even bigger, and it gets bigger and bigger. So that works. That's one way you can do it. One thing I like to do is use the bracket keys on my keyboard. It's a little bit faster for me. So the bracket keys kind of look like parentheses, but they're more square. They're usually above your quotation marks or like your enter key, or just to the right of the P. There's a left bracket and a right bracket, and if you do the right bracket, it makes it bigger, and if you do the left bracket, it makes it smaller. And notice if you just click once, it makes a perfect circle. Now, we'll talk later about how to make more unique brushes, but this is a great way to get started. If you click and drag, it becomes more of a line. Now, if you have, what I like to have and what I have at home is I have a Cintiq. What that is a screen that I can draw on, and it's really fun and really cool. Now, you can also use tablets, and that's basically a device that you can draw on. It's kind of like you have a stylus, which is kind of like a pencil, and you're drawing on this device to make it more like you're drawing rather than having to use a mouse, which can be a little bit trickier than if you can just draw. So right now I'm at home drawing on my Cintiq, which makes it a little more fun and easy to draw with. Now keep in mind too that we can change our colors whenever we want to anything else, and you can just draw on top. Now notice everything is in this layer. Now if I turn my face layer back on, you'll notice that now this colors and things on top are actually on top of my face. And there's an order here of what's in order. So actually, let's make another layer of color. I think that'll be the best way to show. So let's do a new layer, and we'll just call this Paint 2. Or you might even want to make it, I'm going to say it's yellow, because maybe I just decide to do all my yellow coloring on this layer. So let me pick a yellow, and I'm just going to do some little scribbles. Fun, right? So my yellow, notice, is on top of all these other scribbles I have. But if you click and drag the layer, you can actually move the order. And so now my yellow is behind all these other colors. Now, one exercise that you might try to do, which can be fun and also help you understand layers, is for you to build a hamburger. So I'm going to hide all these layers at the moment because all I did is, so this is just some fancy background that I had. It really could just be any plain color. And then I made a bread. Now, I think I didn't use, I'm not remember quite sure how I made all these, but this is a little fancier than just using the paintbrush. But this is, see how everything is in order and things stack on one thing to the top until we get the bread. And with that top bread on top, you can't even see what's underneath here. So one thing you might want to do is, let me make a new file. You might want to stack it in a different way. You could stack it like this if you want. I'm just going to do or actually let's do 1,000 by 1,000 square pixels. Make sure this doesn't say inches because that would be a really huge file. Make sure this says pixels, 1,000 by 1,000. And your resolution can be anywhere from 72 to 150, and then hit create. There's my brush again. Now I'm going to use my bracket keys to make it smaller. And so this layer down here, I'm going to call Bottom Bun. And then I'm going to pick like a brown bun kind of color here. And I'm just going to draw a bun. I'm not going to be too picky about it here, but just have a little fun here and have a brown bun. And I'm going to need a top bun too, so let's go ahead and create that layer. So I hit my new layer, double click, top bun. And since I already have this color, I want my bun color to be the same, right? So now you might want to get fancy with this. You might try different colors. You might put those little sesame seeds on there, you know, pick a white color and a smaller brush and put those seeds on there, which we like. So we have a bottom bun. Oh, one thing I forgot. So this bottom bun actually has all this white behind it. That's kind of my background layer. And I don't really want that. So let me change this and call it background. Let's say we go back to what we would have started with. There's another tool you might want to know about as well. It's called the eraser. Now you'll notice though, it acts like a brush as well, so I can change the size with my bracket keys. If I erase, it's actually erasing everything, including that white. What are we going to do then? Well, let's just say we're going to delete this layer and start over. That might be the easiest thing sometimes. So let's click on the background layer, and there's a little trash can, a little baby tiny trash can here. Click that, and it says, do you want to delete? And you say yes. I'm going to make a new background layer. So let's make a new background layer. We'll put it at the bottom. We'll call it background. But we want this filled with some kind of color, right? So what can we do? Well, we have the paint bucket tool. And on your toolbar, you might actually see this. This is called a gradient tool. So your paint bucket tool probably is hidden underneath the gradient tool. So find that thing that looks like a bucket. Then you choose the color you want. And maybe I'll just do a plain gray. You hit OK. And you can click anywhere with the paint bucket tool, and it's going to fill that whole area with gray. Now my background is gray. Now I'm going to leave that alone. I'm not going to mess with my background anymore. You might want to draw in a little table or something like that, but I'm going to lock it. Now let's bring my top bun back. There we go. And I like this color, but how can I get this exact color back to make my bottom bun one more time? Well, there is a tool called the eyedropper. Let's see, that's on the top. So you can click right here. It looks like a dropper that you suck water or something out of something else. And if you click on a color with that tool, you'll see that my foreground color changed. So now I can go back to my brush, and I need to make a new layer called Bottom Bun. And let's draw that bottom bun one more time. There we go. So now I have a top bun and a bottom bun, and even though these two don't overlap, I think I want to drag and make my top bun be on top of that. So now it's up to you to pick colors and draw in some other parts of your, either maybe it's a hamburger, maybe it's a sandwich. So let's just say I'm making a hamburger. And so I can draw some hamburger. Whoops, I forgot to change layers and make a new layer for that. What can I do? Well, there's a handy feature called undo. You can go to edit and undo brush, and you can click this as many times as you have to go back. So I undo that, undo again. Uh-oh, if I go too far, I'm gonna start undoing the things I wanted to keep. There's something called redo. So you can go back if you need to and redo the layer order change. So you have that option. So let me make a new layer this time, and I'll call it hamburger. So that undo feature is very handy. And so let me use my brush tool and draw in some burger. Yum. So another tool I want to show you today, the move tool. So at the very top, there's a double arrow kind of thing going on. And if you click on that, one thing I would make sure you have too is up here, check this box that says auto select, and check this down here that says layer. This will make this tool easy to use. So the way it works is when you click on an object, you can just grab it and move it around, and it'll change the layer for you. So I can click on the burger. Notice it changed it to that layer. I can click on this. So you might want to start to arrange this in the order that you want. Now we could just be done like that. Uh-oh, do we have a problem here? The bun is kind of behind the burger. That doesn't look quite right, does it? So remember, these are in order. Let's change the order. Now it kind of looks more like a hot dog, right? So you can move things around. And I think this bottom one, I'm not sure if I think I'll just have it line up. You could maybe overlap it if you want that. But let me create some more room here because I'm going to make a new layer and you can add more fun stuff. So you make a sandwich, see how high you can make a sandwich, see what you can do with it. So I might add some cheese. Go back to my brush tool. I've got a nice big piece of cheese there, right? And I can use my move tool if I want to move it around. Whoops, of course I drew my cheese on my hamburger layer instead of the cheese layer. So let me hit undo. Edit, undo, and there's a nice trick. You can hit, if you have a Mac, you can hit Command Z. That's like undoing. Or if a PC, you can hit Control Z. So undo, brush. Let me go to the cheese layer this time. Hit the brush, and let me make some cheese. Go to my move tool. I can put this in the order I want. And let me put the cheese underneath the bun so the bun covers it a little bit. And we're starting to make a sandwich, and it's pretty fun, right? And so that's kind of how I did this. I got a little bit fancier with this one, but you can see how there's an order to your layers, and you have control over that. So let me close these and offer you one more suggestion of some things you can play around with these. So let me delete these two layers. Remember, we have that tiny little trash can. You can hit that and say yes, delete, hit that, yes, delete, and we're back to the start of just me. So let's make a layer and do some fun stuff. So what I recommend is you get a picture of somebody that you want to draw on. So maybe it's your parents, or maybe it's your brother or sister or something like that, and we can do some fun stuff. Now, we don't want to be mean, but we can have some fun with it. When I was a kid, I would find pictures or magazine pictures, and I would draw. Now, don't use your parents' magazines for this without asking, but I would draw and draw glasses and mustaches and things on pictures that I found. So, like I said, ask your parents before you do any of that thing in real life. But on Photoshop, you can do it all you want, and you won't get in trouble. So let's make a new layer, and I'm going to call this mustache. I'm going to make, remember that eyedropper tool? You can use that on pictures as well. So let's grab the eyedropper tool, because I want to get the same color as my hair. So I'm just going to click in here somewhere. It's a little too dark, maybe, yeah, nice brown. And I have a bit of a mustache already, but maybe I want a cooler mustache. So let me get the brush tool. And you can choose the size you want by using the brackets. And I'm just going to draw a mustache. Let me switch to my Cintiq here, which make this a little bit easier. And I can even add some eyebrows. Or maybe I've got like a really big beard. There's a lot of fun things you can do with that, right? So that's my mustache layer. Let's make a new layer, and I'm going to call this glasses. So I always wanted some glasses that'll be fun. So I'm just going to do some black glasses. There's my brush tool again. I can just draw some glasses, maybe a little bit Harry Potter style here. Now I've got some glasses. Now, if I wanted to, I could draw over top of this and make them kind of look like sunglasses or something. But so this is fun, right? Let me make one more layer. I'm going to call this a scar. So I'm going to pretend I'm a tough guy and I got a big scar on my forehead. So I'm going to use like a dark red, and I'm going to draw, maybe make my brush a little bit smaller, and I'm going to draw a scar like this. Maybe like something you'd have for Halloween. Now remember, we can still move stuff around. So for each layer, if I decide I want that scar to go somewhere else, I can grab my move tool and I can just put this wherever I want. You can also resize this. If you go to Edit and go to Free Transform, you can actually grab any of these corners and you can make it bigger or smaller. And if you kind of let your mouse hang out around the outside corner, you can rotate it. Now, one thing that's cool about layers too is you can copy them. So let's say I want more than one scar. I can go to this little tiny little menu right here, where they call it a hamburger menu actually. Click on that, and we have duplicate layer. Now it lets you name it. So maybe I just want to call it scar 2. Hit OK. So now I have another one. Now it's right on top of each other, so you can't really see it. So let's use our move tool. And oops, I moved the wrong thing. So you have to click right on the thing you want to move. Now remember, we've got the zoom tool. If you want to zoom in or hit minus here, you can zoom out. So if you need to get closer, you can zoom and then grab my move tool again, and then I'll make sure I click right on that scar and see there's 2 of them now, right? So you can have a lot of fun playing around with this with a picture of somebody. So that's one assignment you can do. One last thing we might try is, have you ever wanted to be in space? Now, maybe I have a better picture for this, but if you can ever find any pictures from NASA, you can actually use those. They actually encourage people to use their photos because you're, we have all, and your parents have paid taxes to pay for all these pictures to get taken. So you can use these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and I'm going to choose Select All. So I'm in another file now. My other one's still open. I'm going to go Select All and go to Edit and Copy. That's going to copy everything in that layer. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say Edit and Paste. Now you might see a little error message about the color. You can just hit OK on that. It depends on your photo. You may not see that though. So paste that photo in. Now notice it's a little bit small. So let's do the free transform. So Edit, Free Transform. And you can scale this up. Now, if you notice that it's getting kind of squished this way or squished that way, you might try to hold Shift to keep it square or to keep it the same proportion. You don't want to stretch it too far. But Photoshop kind of changed over the years what they do for that. So I'm changing this to better fit, and I'm going to have this astronaut guy behind me, right? And after you've done a transform, I don't think I mentioned this last time, you hit the Enter or Return key. You can also hit this little checkbox. Now notice it put this layer in. Let me give it a name. I'm going to call it Space Background. We want this to be behind me, right? So let's drag it behind me all the way down here. I'm gonna let go. Uh-oh, what's the problem we have here? You'll see that the photo I took had a white background, or you might have a different background in your photo. So how do we deal with this to get rid of it so that we can see the space behind it? Well, there's complicated ways to do this and there's easy ways to do this. And so let's focus on the easy way this time. I'm going to click on the eraser tool. It looks like one of those gum erasers that you might have, eraser tool. Remember, it's like a brush. Make it a little bigger, and I'm just going to erase away this white. Now you'll have to be a little careful when you get to your head. So I'm getting all the big areas first, because that's easy. And then I'll get a smaller brush when I need to get close to my head. So you want to get it as close as you can. So now I have an astronaut behind me, right? I can use the zoom tool and zoom in nice close. Now one trick I like is if you're zoomed in really close and hit the space bar, you see how it changes to a hand? You can move around like this. There's actually a hand right here you can click too if you want to do it that way. But you can zoom, and again, if you hit the minus on the zoom, you can zoom out, or the plus to zoom in. But now I can go back to my eraser. Now what happens if you go too far? Whoops, I erased too much. Well, I can undo. So let's make my brush smaller using my left bracket key. And now I can get a lot closer to my hair and do a better job of erasing all that. So I can go around my whole head and erase all this, and nobody will even know that I never was in space. It's Photoshop trick fun. So I encourage you to try this out. I'm not going to have time here to show you all the erasing, but I think you have the idea. Now don't forget to save. You want to go and save your file, and you can go File, Save, and it'll ask you where to put it. If you have a newer version of Photoshop, you can actually save it to the cloud, which is fun. Or you save it on your computer and decide where you want to save it, and you can give it any name. But if you save it, you can open it back up later and play with it some more. Or if you have a printer, that can be fun. You can print out this kind of stuff that you make and share it with your friends. So I hope you learned a lot today in this session, and I hope you go do some fun things in Photoshop. Have a great afternoon, morning, evening, whenever you're watching this.